is being live streamed, but only the audio, not the visual. I'm Councillor Janet Evans, and I will be chairing this meeting. The committee for this hearing comprises Councillor Aretti and Councillor Bentham and me. We are joined by David Williams from the Council's licensing team, our legal officer, Lindsay Lemassurier, and also with us our committee officers, Holly Weaver, Emily Beard, and Ms. Muhudin is not attending today. Before we start the hearing for this case, just a few ground rules. Please keep your microphones on mute until you are invited to speak, as only 2 microphones can be in use at any one time, and please make sure mobile phones are on silent. Thank you. The case before us today is to grant a license for St. George Coffee, 124C and 126 Kings Road. Now, for declarations of interest. I have no declaration of interest to make. However, I do know the premises, and I visited there on Monday. I did not introduce myself. I was a customer, and I had a look around the premises. Do the other members have any declarations to make? Councillor Aretti?
No, Chair.
Councillor Benton?
No, Chair.
For clarity, I will outline the procedure of the meeting, which has already been circulated with the papers. First, the licensing officer, Mr. Williams, will give a brief outline of the application. Please, could you confirm your attendance?
I am here, Chair.
Thank you. Then I ask the applicant's legal advisor, is she here? Okay, we're on opposite sides today. Ms. Sarah Lefebvre to present her submission. She will have up to a maximum of 10 minutes to do so. She is joined by her instructing solicitors, Lisa Inzani and Kerry McGowan, as well as their clients, Mr. Alfonso Saracino, Laura Pisanu, Luca Sentaro, and Torben Anderson, who may be able to assist members should they have any questions. Could you please confirm your attendance?
I can speak for all of us. We're all here, and that you've correctly identified us.
Thank you. Then we'll have questions which may be asked by members of the committee and the legal officer of the applicant, followed by questions from the objectors. Okay. Next, the objectors, Paul McWilliam, okay, and Timothy Fitch, hello. They will present their objections. They will have up to a maximum of 10 minutes each to do so. You have now confirmed your attendance, so thank you. Then questions may be asked by members of the committee and the legal officer of the objectors, followed by questions from the applicant. After this, we will ask our legal officer, Ms. Lemassurier, to deal with any further questions she may have, and then she will lead on the draft conditions. The list of potential conditions has been circulated to all of the parties prior to the hearing. Please, could you confirm your attendance?
Present, Chair.
Good. Then finally, we will turn to the governance team to see if any issues have been raised that we need to consider. There will be no summing up, and the meeting will end. I would like to remind everyone that the committee has read the papers which comprise the main pack and the 3 additional submissions from the applicant, and 1 additional submission from an objector that has been circulated to the parties. So there's no need to repeat their content, but please do draw your attention and our attention to certain points and pages. Let's get going. Mr. Williams, please can you outline the case for us and advise if there has been any additional documentation received?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Today's application has been submitted by Tocqueville Kings Limited for the grant of a new premises licence in respect of St George Coffee, 124C and 126 Kings Road, London SW3 4TR. The applicant is seeking the grant of a new premises licence to permit the sale by a retailer of alcohol off the premises Monday to Saturday from 1000 hours to 2200 hours and Sunday from 1000 hours to 2100 hours. A summary of the proposed hours and conditions can be found on page 6 and 7 of today's main bundle. The licensing authority has received 25 representations opposing the application, including representations from the Royal Avenue Residents Association and Mitre House Residents Association. A summary of those representations can be found on page 8 and 9 of the main bundle, and a copy of the full representations can be found at Appendix C. Council records show that at the time of this report was written, no noise complaints have been received in the preceding 24 months, and no temporary event notices have been submitted in the past 12 months. The Planning Department has not made a formal representation in connection with the application, and a summary of their response can be found on page 9 and a copy of their email at Appendix D. Other than the list of proposed conditions that are to be considered if the committee were minded to grant the application, there have been 4 other items containing additional documents circulated for this hearing. Firstly, from the applicant's solicitor received on the 14th of May with 5 PDFs attached. Secondly, from the applicant's solicitor received 23rd of May with 3 Word documents and 2 PDFs attached. Thirdly, one from the Royal Avenue Residents Association received on the 24th of May with 1 PDF attached. And lastly, from the applicant's solicitor on the 28th of May with 3 PDFs attached. That concludes the summary of today's application.
Thank you. Now for the applicant's case. Ms. Lefebvre, please can you advise if there have been any amendments to your application?
No amendments, Chair, thank you.
Thank you. Can you now present your submission? You have up to 10 minutes to do so.
Thank you very much, Chair, and I have set my stopwatch to time myself, so I will hopefully confine myself. I'll make this brief initial submission by reference to a document that you have, and I know you've read, written by me, called Outline Submissions and running to 7 paragraphs. And I'll elaborate briefly on some aspects of that in opening this application. Paragraph 1, then, I have set out in summary form this application. The character and scope of this application is, of course, key and the key building block on which you'll base your decision. If you grant this application, it would permit the sale of alcohol on these premises for consumption only on these premises for those limited hours that Mr. Williams has just alluded to, within a small, extant cafe. By small, I mean by fire risk assessment, and as you know, pursuant to our operational management plan, the maximum number of covers at any one time is 118. It's extant in the sense that it is trading and has been trading since 2022. It's an application that, as you know, is supported by both an operational management plan that you've seen and read, a detailed acoustic assessment prepared by Mr. Anderson, who can speak to his assessment and the work he did and the conclusions he reached, and a set of proposed conditions, which you'll see and have read at page 22 of your report. Perhaps importantly for you to understand is this, that St George's trades on its ground floor. The first floor of the premises is also owned by this applicant, Tocqueville Holdings, and it's part of the space in which Mr. Anderson was able to carry out his assessments. It's the second floor that's occupied by Ms. Giacinti, whose representation you'll have read at page 38 of your papers, and then the top floor of the premises is again owned by this applicant, by Tocqueville Holdings. I've characterised the hours as limited. It is referred to variously in the representations as a late night premises. Matter for you, but within the licensing field, hours that take you up to 10 o'clock or 9 o'clock on Sundays wouldn't typically be understood as late night. You've helpfully provided, or your officers have, within the bundle, comparator premises within the vicinity. Those premises that operate to hours of this type in the footprint are Itsu and the well-known cafe sushi provider, and Rixo, the flagship clothing store. You know something about the food offering at the premises. You know, I hope, that it is run by an experienced management team. I say that based on hard evidence, both in the development and the provision to you of the operational management plan, and, as Mr. Williams has already explained to us, on the proven ability of the management to run without creating issue on its extant operation. The proposed designated premises supervisor, Luca Cintaro, who sits to my far right, has directly relevant experience, you know this because we've submitted his CV, as a personal licensee operating mostly in Westminster, where he in fact has been running a St George's Cafe there for some years, again without issue. And the significance of that is directly relevant expertise running exactly this premises in an area which is densely occupied by residents who are informed and active and aware, and as Kensington and Chelsea, supervised and inspected by expert responsible authorities who would, if there was an issue, have brought it to Westminster and indeed to our attention. Paragraph 3, all I've done is set out and respectfully remind you of the framework for your decision making, the objectives, your guidance, and your statement of licensing policy and the guidance. And of course you will and must take into account and give appropriate weight to all matters you consider relevant, and discount those matters which are properly irrelevant to your decision. Relevant matters, I would say, include the extent and the ambit of the application, the conditions that have been offered, the independent assessment for noise and acoustic risks of the premises, the manner in which this applicant has sought to and has engaged with its community prior to making the application and indeed this hearing. You know something of that from the timeline, the supporting communication material we've submitted to you, all of which was on the advice of your very helpful licensing officers with whom we fully engaged as a pre-application exercise, as you would expect of a responsible applicant. And of course you'll take into account the concerns expressed in representations which do genuinely bite on the licensing objectives, and which we say, and I say to you, the operational plan has been designed to and does effectively and do effectively address. Just a word or two about some aspects of what I've just said in terms of relevancy. You'll have picked up from the operational plan stroke conditions that as part of our proposal, alcohol would be served and only be served through waiter-waitress service via the dispense bar to customers seated at table. That is a condition which is not atypical, it is enforceable. It can be an important condition for responsible and licensing authorities because of the control it requires of a venue to exercise over the sale, dispense and supervision of customers whilst they're on premises. You know too what we've said about SIA staff. We propose to employ a door supervisor from 6 o'clock in the evening until close. That again it is an important and recognised as an important control measure, not only to control the point of ingress and access to the premises, but also incidentally having a really significant effect on the wider community, a deterrent effect, a supervisory effect, a visible presence on the street at the time when the premises is operational. And you'll know better than anybody in this room that the review process set out in statute, triggerable by any resident, by a responsible authority, if something were to go wrong in terms of compliance or excess interference with the licensing objectives, is an effective mechanism for onward supervision of any licence you are minded to grant today. You know, and you'll have read the noise and acoustic report, and as I say, Mr. Anderson can well speak for himself on that. But what he did was take the quietest night of the week to produce the lowest ambient levels and then assess what noise-sensitive premises would be likely to or were experiencing in the event that the premises were to continue or this premises licence were to be granted. You know that his conclusions are that the impact of this licence, if you were minded to grant it, would be effectively negligible. He has, as you would expect of a responsible and independent expert, made some observations about a noise management plan, that music noise levels should be at background at all times, that it should cease in any form some minutes before the closing hours of the premises, and all of that is inside his report. But the key and headline point is that there has been a proper, full, comprehensive acoustic assessment of this venue and its impact and likely or potential impact into its environment, and that evidence is placed before you as part of the relevant material before you today. Relevant to and a critical part of the licensing process, and I'm turning now to my paragraph 5 with a minute and a quarter left on the clock, is the assessment of your responsible authorities, who are, as we know, the repositories of expertise within this, in fact, as in any council, on nuisance, on crime and disorder, on safety, on the protection of children from harm. And what you have in response to this application is universal silence. There has never been a concern expressed by any responsible authority about this application. Not that they made an objection and it was withdrawn, it's been negotiated, no. And if they had a concern, quite certainly in this council you would have heard about it. And that, I suggest, is a critical part of your decision making. I've touched at paragraph 6 on irrelevant matters. Those include concerns about need or perceived concerns about need, precedent setting, the nature and balance and extent of the balance of the property portfolio owned by this applicant. It's an application that, as all applications under the Licensing Act, falls to be considered and determined squarely on its own merits. It is an application I would characterise as modest. I will have some observations on the draft conditions when we come to that stage, but I'm happy to make those observations in response to your questions or as you consider appropriate. I'm 10 seconds over, Chair, so I'll stop speaking now.
Thank you very much. Now, any questions first from the committee? Mr. Oretti?
Thank you, Chair. To the applicants, either Ms. Faye or anyone could answer that. What is your primary reason for change of use, rather serving alcohol? Is that a financial proposition or a brand or expansion? Thank you.
I think, and I'll let Mr. Saracino add if he wants to, it is consistent with the brand and the way it operates in other venues, as I've already explained. It is an additional or sort of ancillary offering that we'd like to provide to our clients. It's consistent with the modelling as a continental cafe model. So it's consistency within the brand, it's consistency within the particular offering. It's an additional service that we'd like to be able to provide to clients. If it has a side commercial benefit, fabulous, but that's not the primary motivation for doing it. It is part of our intended or hoped for aspiration for the venue.
Just to follow up on that, thank you for your answer. As you pointed out, that it's an expansion to your brand. Is there a demand from any of your customers, or is just an aspirational proposition? Thanks.
I think the position is that occasionally or sometimes customers do ask. We know that it's something that customers enjoy in other of our venues, so that it's an evidence-based application. It's not sticking a finger in the air and just hoping that it's successful. It has been successful for us elsewhere, and it is something that customers do sometimes ask about.
Could you tell me where elsewhere is the location, please?
Westminster is the good example of that. That's the premises that I've touched on that Mr. Centaro runs already for. Two in Westminster. I knew about one of them, but there are two in Westminster.
And was that a recent application, or was that an existing one, or you modified?
I certainly ought to know the answer to one of these because I made the application myself, but I'm trying to remember what the date of it was. 2 years ago, 2022, and that's in St Martin's Lane, which is an area I'm sure you're familiar with. The other one was already licensed when it was taken over. So one was an existing license that was taken over, and the second is the one that I made the application for in 2022.
Councillor Benton.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for your presentation. I think just sort of sifting through objections, I think one thing that people are looking for is how you're going to manage. Now we've got a number from I think the applicant, which is 118 seated covers. And I know from experience that what really can just make or break a place where alcohol is served is a really effective and enforced dispersal plan. So could you tell us a little bit about how you plan to manage that? Thank you.
Yes, and thank you for the question. It allows me to go straight to the operational management plan. And you'll know that from page 2, what we've tried to do is describe to you how that departure would be managed. I've touched on it a little through the instruction of an SIA door staff member who would be single door to the premises. That's where they'd be stationed. So you'd have immediate supervision, you'd have immediate ability to control and speak to people as they're leaving, make sure, give them the advice, point them in the right direction. So that would be a constant. The door is also covered by the CCTV, so that would allow us to watch and supervise, and I suppose that provides a record had there been any issue of disturbance. You know, because we've told you through the plan, that we expect to have a developed relationship with a local taxi firm. We've identified a point away from the residential concerns that have been expressed in this application, to which we would ask customers to summon taxis if they were going to remain in the premises until the taxi had arrived, and call from within the premises. I think in our experience, as with dispersal generally, so much depends on having a sufficiency of staff, the atmosphere and dynamic within the premises that's developed, the conversation and communication with customers as they leave, so that they leave in an informed, controlled, friendly way. As you know from the extent of the application, it could never be the case that these were customers coming from a noisy, music-driven environment straight out onto the pavements, because that isn't and couldn't be, and there's no permissions for that to be the environment. And you know too from the operational plan what the staffing levels will be aside from the SIA staff. So it really is a very high level of staffing, a ratio of staff to customers. So we've tried to explain it. I'm sorry if that wasn't a very articulate response. I suspect the management plan is a better description than I've just been able to offer and allude to.
No, I appreciate elaborating in person. Yes, I mean, that speaks to, I understand it was offered to have the SIA in the evening, and I think that answer that these are things we will pick up throughout the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. I have several questions for you. First of all, you said there's 118 people. Since they're all going to be seated, how many tables do you think you'll need?
To ask Mr. Saracino to help me with that question. I haven't done the maths. I do have a plan layout, and I think if you give me a moment, I can count the tables, but I haven't got that answer ready. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20.
Because if there's tables of 2, you would need a lot of tables.
Yes, it's a mix. I think, and I had hoped and understood that this template had been sent through to yourselves, and with apologies if it hasn't reached you. I think the total number is about 22 or so. There are, the biggest table that's shown on the plan is one table that has a capacity of 10 seats around it. There are then a number of smaller tables which can take 6, and then a number of smaller tables again that can take 4, and then a number of tables that can take either 3 or 2, and then some single tables as well.
So how many covers are you anticipating, since everybody's supposed to be seated?
The total covers that it could accommodate is that figure of 180. That's it.
Right, but how many are you anticipating in terms of the tables? Are you anticipating, I mean, from what you're telling me, and from the premises size, I'm just trying to figure out how many tables you're going to put in there.
It's 22 tables.
22
as it
tables.
persists, yeah.
Okay. And then you're going to have an increase in staff in order to be able to serve, because right now you have to go up to the counter.
Correct. So we've set out the staffing complement in the operational management plan. And if you look at that at page 2, you'll see that the staffing figures a general manager, an assistant manager, and 3 staff members. And that's in addition to the SIA staff.
And what alcohol are you planning to serve?
Mr. Saracino.
Yes, so we're planning basically just to have red wine, white wine, and rosé, 2 types of it. That's it.
And you're not planning to change that?
No, not for now, no.
Not now, okay, thank you. Now, you have several other premises, and I was just wondering, they're nearby. Are you planning to start a chain of wine shops, or? You don't have to answer that, I'm just asking. Okay. And now for 118 people, what looks to me that hasn't been planned well is I went down to your loo. And when I say loo, I mean there's one toilet, literally for everybody. So if 118 people want to go to the loo and they have been drinking, I don't see how they're going to queue up there.
I'm sorry, yes. So we've got 2 toilets. The other one is basically 124C at the very left in the corner, if you see on the map. So there's
Sorry, do you see it there?
Yeah, there are 2 toilets overall. Disabled toilets as well, so it's all provided.
Right, this is the front of the shop. Sorry, which corner? Back, right?
Move the top left.
Oh, disabled.
Are there 2 toilets there?
There's one there.
Just 2, and what was the other one you said, Janet?
There's one downstairs under 126. So now you're saying that there's also you're counting the disabled loo that's upstairs.
Yes, if you look at the plans at page 25, it doesn't show the basement, which you're talking about, Chair, where the second toilet is. But you can see on the plans, if we look at them in landscape, top left of the plans, you can see the toilet facilities marked there.
And there's just one below.
And then on the basement floor, there's, you went downstairs.
Yes,
Whereabouts do you think the toilets
it's
were?
right here, down here.
All right, so it's not listed. So it's not listed on the basement floor plan. I can't see where it is. I mean, there is one, obviously, but I can't see it listed.
Yeah, it's not on the diagram, that's why we're asking.
The basement isn't shown on the diagram because that isn't part of the licence demise. What is shown on the diagram is the second toilet that I'm talking about, which is at page 25.
Okay, fine. So there's one in the basement.
So one in the basement and one disabled on the ground floor. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Do you think that's adequate for a full bar?
We understand it's adequate. This is an application, or these plans were submitted through building control under the auspices of the architects that you see on the plans. We've followed that advice and haven't at any stage been advised that it is inadequate. If we'd been advised otherwise, I'm quite certain there would have been a greater toilet facility.
And are the loos only available for patrons?
I think so, yeah. Patrons only, yes.
Okay. So the reason I'm asking all this, I know the residents are concerned about people going outside, so I would like you to take that on board and make sure they're properly serviced. Thank you. I think that's all. Committee, any more? Councillor Aretti?
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up from the Chairman's question about the ancillary part as a wine bar, or however you call it, are there any plans that you would, in the future, you would change the coffee shop into a wine bar, or your primary operations will be a wine bar?
Absolutely not, and that's what we've sought to characterise and reflect in the conditions. It's always difficult to condition a spirit or an intent or a way of operating, but we have done our best, and that condition that says it will be by service and only service directly to customers seated at a table is a significant means of ensuring that it can't become and couldn't become under, I don't know, sometime in the future under a different owner, some other character or flavour of premises. I suppose the second piece of obvious control that's baked into this licence is the hours. I think a typical wine bar, or certainly if I were describing a typical wine bar to somebody who didn't know our kind of licensed premises, I don't think I'd be describing a premises that stopped its service at 10 o'clock in the evening. That wouldn't be consistent to me with a typical wine bar. But we have done our best to bake into the licence the way in which the premises will operate and will continue to operate. And to answer the underlying question, there are absolutely no plans at all to change the character, flavour, spirit of the premises. It is demonstrably working for us in our other premises. There would be a sort of commercial insanity in changing something that is functioning.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer. The other question is, your wine, the stock, are they just general retail, or do you have a wine vineyard where you bring that from, or any of the directors or the business owners would owning any of the vineyards elsewhere? Thank you. I know it's not part of the licensing, but it's just out of residents' interest here.
So it's an external provider. Apparently, despite the completely Italian contingent, it's mostly coming from France, so it's a French venue.
Councillor Benton, any additional questions?
Thank you, Chair. Just one. So you're explaining how, so the applicants, you have the ground floor and the basement, obviously, and the first and the third. I'm getting that right. So I suppose I'm wondering about, especially, I mean, what do you, I mean, assuming if you're going to use it, obviously not licensed, but if you're going to be using the higher floors for storage or anything, and you're still going to have staff going up and down. My worry is really about just disturbance to neighbours, to be honest. Nothing at all. So they're sitting empty.
I'm so sorry. So we talked straight over you, but those upper floors that are in the ownership of this applicant are residential in nature. They're nothing to do with the trading operation of the...
Right, okay, so it'll just be residential. And,
absolutely.
Yeah, so I suppose I'm just thinking about, just there will be, I mean, however well everything's, run, there will be a natural increase of just ambient noise and so forth. But you have, I mean, I know you've mentioned this, obviously it's been touched upon. So I think that answers my question, actually. I'm worried about disturbance, and I think that's answered. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a few more questions. You have not applied for any TENS. Is there a reason for that? Just to test the waters?
There's no particular reason. I suppose, and this is speculation on my part, so Mr. Saracino will correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're looking to build into the sort of the general offering of a premises, actually a temporary event notice doesn't in fact test those waters at all. All it does is allow existing customers to experience and then not experience that sort of ancillary offering. That's my speculation, but it hasn't been done.
Thank you. Now, taking one of the issues would be the dispersal policy. To carry on from that, there usually is a problem with staff leaving a premises. So if you're closing at 10, your customers are out by 10:20, then the staff, can you train them and agree that they will not stand around smoking outside, making noise, having lock-ins and then rolling out drunk? We really have to know that they will leave the premises and go straight to whichever way they get home, the tube or the bus or a motorcycle. But that's very essential because people often do not tell that to the staff.
I agree with that, and that sounds horrendous as an experience that anybody in the vicinity should have to suffer. You'll know, and we'll come on to this no doubt if we reach the stage of discussing the draft conditions that Ms. Le Mesurier has produced. But at condition 14 of that document, she's proposed a training condition and a recording of that training. And we hear your observations. It would be a natural part of our training in any event, and we can ensure that's encapsulated within that training as well. We agree. I mean, it's obviously it's an experience that nobody should have to suffer.
And we take it very seriously for our residents that there will be communication. So I hope you will take that on board. I know you've proposed it and we've agreed with we'll talk about that during the conditions, but it's essential, not that we just write it down. You must communicate, and they must have a place that they can communicate with you. Now, one other thing, because you're new at this in our area, would you agree to a temporary license for 18 months?
No, Chair, we wouldn't. We're making an application. We're absolutely entitled to make an application. It's what the scheme of the Act expects and envisages, that a premises licence will be granted. to have effect unless and until surrendered, revoked, otherwise withdrawn. We have a bank of experience to build on as part of our application in your neighbouring borough, and we are trading already, albeit with alcohol, within this borough and on this site without issue. So no, we're not making that application for a time-limited licence, and we remind you again, and you'll know this, that if there were to be an issue inside or outside 18 months, the Act equips you, residents and responsible authorities, with the powers and the process to review, restrict, limit, remove the licence if an issue were to arise. So that's the process that we would commend to you and to others. And again, I suppose on that point, I revert to a point I made in writing and to you orally already. Your responsible authorities presently have no issue with this application. So that is part of that bank of evidence there, universal silence.
Thank you. And what is the reason that you want to start drinking at 10 a.m.?
I think the answer to that is that we took your policy hours and applied for the hours that are reflected within your policy. It's not that we expect any extensive drinking at that time of day, or indeed at any time of day, but those are the hours that your policy envisages for applications of this flavour. So I suppose we rely on Kensington and Chelsea's own thinking as to when a premises might benefit from a degree of trade, and we've taken those hours. We don't have any particular customer research to say, I'd really like to enjoy a glass of wine with my espresso. That there's nothing that I can point to for that.
And I would like confirmation, even though we asked you before. How are you going to seat 118 people?
I'm sure this is me, Chair, but I don't entirely understand the question. There is and will be table capacity to seat 118 people in the layout and according to the layout on the plans that we've submitted to you. It's across, was it 22 tables? It's 22 tables, which provides a range of seating, a number of one-person tables. The majority, I think, probably are three-person, 2, 3 and 4 people, and then 3 tables, I think, from memory, that are capable of seating 6, and a single larger table.
Okay, to me, the maths don't add up. And 22 tables, some taking 1 person and several taking 6. I just don't see how you're going to fit 118 people in there.
We'll recount the plan, but that's what we think it shows. But we will recount it now. I haven't counted the seats around the tables, but I think the maths works. Somebody will do it in the team. Oh, it has been counted, and it's what it shows.
Thank you. We really find it important that we clarify everything before we grant. Okay, that's enough from me. Anyone else have any more questions? Councillor Aretti?
Thank you, Chair. I understand. I'm glad you said there were no complaints made historically, and you're very confident that you can satisfy the residents' concerns. So in good spirit, give residents the benefit of doubt. A temporary license would be reasonably good for the residents to have the confidence on the operations. So to give that benefit of doubt and a good choice for the residents, what would you answer for that?
No,
Thank you.
I don't think I can improve or elaborate on the submissions I've already made. This is an application that has been made for a permanent premises licence. Many such applications are made before you and licensing authorities up and down the land every day, because that is the usual typical scheme of the Act, where the controls and the safety net sits in the review process that is available, as you know, Sarah, as well as I do, available to be triggered at any stage on reasonable grounds by residents, other persons, responsible authorities if there's an issue. So this is an application for a permanent premises licence.
Councillor Benton, are you?
No, just scribbling away.
Okay, thank you. Now we'll move on to questions from our legal officer.
Thank you, Chair. I don't really have any questions at this stage. They will arise during the draft conditions session. And just to confirm, although the applicant has applied for a permanent licence, the committee cannot impose a temporary licence unless agreed by the applicants. I just wanted to make that clear.
Thank you. Any questions from the objectors?
Yes, a few questions from my side. The applicant's representative has stated on several occasions that there's going to be 22 tables at the venue, and yet they presented a plan that shows 30 tables. Can they clarify whether they've changed their mind or changed their plan? But the plan they submitted as late as additional evidence shows 30 tables.
Those behind me are doing the counting. I'm relying on their counting. It's a single plan. If it's been counted wrong, I'll apologise on all our behalfs, but I think the numbers are as we've identified.
I can bring it up to you if you like, and you can count yourself, but there's 30 tables on the plan. Another important aspect that I'd like to question is that the applicant's representative has stated that they don't intend to change the venue from a coffee shop. However, it was decided in this chamber in March that a planning application for a site opposite the St George Coffee was granted that would allow the applicant or a company controlled by the applicant to build a coffee shop on that site with signage of St George Coffee. So it would appear at that stage, and there were our plans to transfer the site of the coffee shop from one side of the road to number 61 Kings Road, and therefore leave the coffee shop site as a licensed bar with no coffee shop activity. Could the applicant please clarify that aspect?
Well, that's not correct in terms of these premises. The application is, as I've described already, and nothing that's just been said has any impact or changes any part of this application. I don't know if you want to hear about applications that have been made for other premises that are no part of this application that's before you today and falls for your consideration today.
Yeah, that's correct. We can't force the applicant to divulge information which isn't directly relevant to this application, but obviously you take on board what Mr Fevre has to say.
Any questions from any of the objectors? Yes?
Madam Chairman, I'd like to go over your point about the loos. The plans of the basement show 2 loos, and there's one on the ground floor. I wonder where the staff will go. They've said that these will be exclusively for the customers. I'd like to ask where the staff will be able to go to the loo. And secondly, can we be assured that these loos have good ventilation and are hygienic and are constantly looked after? Because if you have 118 people queuing up for the loo, they're going to need a lot of care. Thank you very much.
Sorry, just to clarify, in the basement there's 1 loo or 2? 2. And 1 upstairs for disabled?
Yes,
Thank you. So, are you able to answer this gentleman's questions, please?
Yes, of course. In response to the use or where the staff will, which toilets the staff will use, they will use the basement toilet. The indication that we gave in response, I think, to your question, Chair, as to who would be able to use these toilets, was it patrons, was it others? It's not available for people to walk in off the street and use the toilets, but those who are either using the premises as patrons or the staffing complement will use the same toilets. Will they be kept clean and hygienic? Yes, of course they will. Is there a sufficiency of toilets provided for this operational model? Yes, there is, for the reasons I've already indicated. This is an application that was prepared and has been cleared by the building control officers. So yes, if you wanted to, I suppose, build in some kind of condition, or you wanted us to build into our operational management plan or into our training the requirement that the toilets be kept clean at all times, we can do that. I don't know what other comfort I can give, but there's no suggestion but that they are doing or being kept hygienically and are sufficient for use at present.
The implication then is that the downstairs loo will be used for the staff. Does the council have any rules about how many loos should be available to a population of about 100 people who are primarily drinking and eating?
David, are you able to answer that, please?
Certainly not under the Licensing Act, Chair. I can't assist you with any other legislation. It would be health and safety.
Yeah, David's correct in that there's no requirement under the licensing regime. I would imagine there certainly would be requirements to have X amount of toilets when staff are over a certain level under health and safety legislation. Perhaps Ms Lefebvre can...
I think it'd be health and safety. I think under the rubric of the Licensing Act, if there were real concerns, you would have heard under the heading of public safety if there were concerns about hygiene or sufficiency of the toileting facility. While I have the microphone on or my red light on, those behind me have just recounted the plan and offer apologies to the committee. 118 chairs is accommodated for in a total of 31 tables on the submitted plan. Yeah, so with apologies.
So not 22?
Not 22, 31.
31, okay.
Correct.
Any questions from, one moment please, yes.
Can the applicant and their representative confirm that the building control application that was submitted in, I believe, September last year to combine the two premises without planning permission has actually been signed off? Because there seems to be no public record that it has been decided.
It has. I also think that we would have heard something in the planning representation if there were outstanding issues relevant to your consideration today. And you know from, I think, Appendix D, that there are no issues extant raised for your consideration.
I do have one further question, Chair, if that's okay. Can the noise consultant clarify the assumptions they made in terms of how many customers will be leaving the venue at the closing time, effectively, at any one time?
Yes, I'm happy to. And good morning. We've assumed for dispersal that in the final half hour, 20 minutes, that there are about 60 people leaving each way, because we think by that point the capacity for what is a coffee shop with ancillary alcohol will be approximately 50% of customer base.
I see two objectors in the back. Councillor Will.
Got to go to another meeting, but Jem and I, who Ward Council...
Just questions.
Yeah, just wanted to raise issues that we've all, about rubbish and noise on departure, which I think are critical concerns for residents as well.
So in the form of the question is, how will they manage the egress of patrons, and will they be signing up to a commercial waste contract that deals with the waste?
Yes, on the commercial waste point, and I know that those asking that question have to leave, but it will form part of the conditions discussion that will come to you probably after they've left, but I suspect that will find its way into conditioning as to timing. As to egress, I don't know whether you've been here all the way through the hearing or not, perhaps missed the earlier discussion, but the councillors have been very keen to question us on the dispersal plans, and we've looked with some care at the operational management system, and as part of the audio recording you'll hear what we said in response to it. We're live to it, we're sensitive to it, and a very great deal of thought has gone into it. That it has been distilled to some extent into the operational management plan, and the controls that exist, I suppose, consist of staffing levels, direction to customers as they leave, the identification of both taxi and smoking areas away from the sources, the places where you and your fellow objectors live. All of those matters have been touched on already.
Please speak into the mic.
I'm so sorry. I'm trying to look over my shoulder at the same time to repeat the answers that I've already given, and to accommodate the questions that are being directed again. I think I've finished now, though.
Thank you very much. Okay, now for the objector's case. Mr. McWilliam and Mr. Fitch, please can you present your submissions? You have up to 10 minutes each to do so.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I certainly won't keep you 10 minutes. I've been privileged to live in Wellington Square since 1945. And because of the position of my house, I've got a grandstand view of the King's Road, and I've been able to watch it, its ebb and flow and character over nearly 80 years. It's a fascinating part of its history, as you'll know, and I've seen it all. There have always been two issues that have a negative influence on those of us, on the quality of life of those of us who live in what should be a quiet and peaceful place to live. Noise, particularly late in the evening and at night, and rubbish. It's certainly noisy on the King's Road. One would expect it to be in the daytime, because there was a time when it was one of the most famous roads in England, even not the world. Wellington Square behaves a bit like a sound box, and one gets used to that in the day, but at night it's made worse, and we are frequently woken up by the sounds of delivery lorries or vans uploading or unloading. Thanks to the council, this has not been so bad recently, because following our complaints, they and the local police were able to stop this, but sadly we've lost our 2 local police stations. The main cause of both these problems, that's noise and rubbish, has always been nearby eating and drinking establishments. And the creation of this large wine bar is not going to help at all, particularly with over 100 people opposite the entrance to our square. Despite what is said, I'm afraid we will be faced with customers collecting, particularly around closing time, at the bottom of the square. I don't think, in all honesty, that customers are going to go over to Smith Street to find or search for their Uber cars or their taxis. And I just wonder whether the Smith Street people know about this, because they have problems of their own in traffic, or even... And the same goes for the smokers, which the applicants say will be ushered to the corner of Bywater Street. I wonder whether the people in Bywater Street know about this. They won't do that. People who leave the wine bar will cross the road and stand in Wellington Square waiting for their taxis or their Uber cars, smoking, talking loudly, perhaps even shouting, and perhaps even intoxicated. There will be taxis and Uber cars coming into the square, parking there, waiting for custom. And this will be noisy, and the bulk of this will be in front of my house, and I will be kept awake by it. And then there's what they leave behind and do. In the square, in the garden, behind James Osborne's flower stall, in people's basements, on our doorsteps, mine in particular because I have a portico and people can hide from view. And we will get discarded cigarettes, vapes, cartons, rubbish and human waste in all its forms. And we, the residents, have to clear it all up. I've said it before, Wellington Square should be a quiet and peaceful place to live in. Surely the council must be aware of the added detrimental impact that the granting of this alcohol licence will have on the character of this part of the King's Road and also on the quality of life of people who live in the square and in its immediate vicinity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Mr. McWilliam?
Thank you, Chair. So my name is Paul McWilliam. I am a resident of Wellington Square, and I live at the end of Wellington Square, close to the King's Road. And I'm here to represent the families like myself, like my own, that live in close proximity to this, to the subject premises, of which there are many. There's a single mother with a baby living above the premises, and she's not here today because of her child is sick, but otherwise she'll be here making her representations personally. There's families living directly opposite the premises in the above the shop opposite, and then there's families, my own family and another family living on the western side of the square closest to the premises, and a family living next to Tim at number 2 Wellington Square. So there are many families with children and young children. Philippa Cadogan lives at number 6 Wellington Square, and she has a young baby. So many families who will be severely disrupted if this application is granted, and by what has been, you'll have read the 25 objections, many of which refer to the noise and nuisance that will be generated by having a bar. And let's be under no misapprehension here. This is going to become a bar. People are not going to be drinking coffee at 10 o'clock at night. They're going to be drinking Alfonso's wine and rolling out of there at 10:30. To be clear, the closing hours, the premises are due to close at 10:30, and therefore people will be smoking, talking and ordering their taxis until 10:45 and perhaps dispersing by 11 p.m. And that will obviously severely disrupt the tranquility of the families and people living in proximity to the premises. And while it's a given that if you live close to the King's Road, you can expect to have disturbance from the commercial activity during the daytime, that commercial activity mostly ends by 6-7 p.m. And I think it would be the only way to alleviate these concerns would be for if the license was granted, for it to end at 7 p.m. so there's no chance of disturbance to the local residents, and it would be operating along similar hours to the other disruptive premises in the neighbourhood. So these premises were previously a clothes shop and a hairdresser's, and so they're completely unsuitable for operation as a bar. In particular, they have glass frontages, which will obviously not protect the local residents from any noise that emanates from the customers or or music from inside the venue. And in particular, there's no rear exit from the venue. So the only entrance and exits to the subject premises are the two doors that open onto the King's Road. And the applicant has proposed that one of those doors will be closed after 8 o'clock. So if there's a fire in the premises, there's very limited exits for the customers, and in particular anybody in the basement of the premises 126 has no chance to escape if if the staircase is blocked by fire. So So there's a very significant risk to the customers and patrons from a fire perspective, and no exits other than the two onto the King's Road, one of which is going to be closed at 8 o'clock. So I think it would be that there should be an assessment by the fire authority to ensure that that it's safe to have 118 patrons at this venue. And just to be clear, the applicant at a meeting with the residents said that there would only be 75 covers at the venue, and hence no doubt represented the same to the competent authorities. And only last Friday did they present a plan that showed 118 covers at the venue. So everybody's objections to date and the competent authorities' assessment has no doubt been based on wrong information, that there will be 75 covers and not 118 as now presented. And it seems that the applicant doesn't even know how many tables he has in his own venue. The other aspect that's been misrepresented is that this site has only been operating on its current scale for a matter of a couple of months. So the site at 124C has been joined by a narrow alleyway, a narrow archway, to 126, and 124C has not been operated in any form for a number of years. So when they say they've been operating this site without issue for several years, that only relates to the much smaller venue at 126 and not to the current size of the venue. And it's been operating as a coffee shop, closing at 6 o'clock at night, so hence unlikely to create noise issues for the local residents. Whereas the wine bar operation will, as has been widely discussed, will no doubt cause significant disruption to the local residents. As you're well aware, one of the aspects that under which the licence needs to be considered is public safety. And there's a significant public safety issue with the use of this venue as a bar, not just the fire safety aspects, but also the fact that the pavement outside the venue is extremely narrow, one of the narrowest areas on the King's Road. So at no point is it wider than wider than 3 meters, and it's mostly 2.5 meters wide. So if you've got 118 customers dispersing onto that pavement, it's inevitable that some of them will spill over into the road. And those ones that spill into the road inevitably will be struck by cars at some stage. And so granting this licence has the foreseeable and inevitable consequence that a customer of the venue will eventually be killed or injured by a passing car, because there's no way to alleviate that aspect, because the size of the pavement is the size of the pavement. If the applicant is going to clear the venue by 10:30, as the conditions as they propose say, then what are they going to do? They're either pushing people into the path of traffic, or they're not clearing the venue by 10:30, but they can't achieve both objectives. So this site is wholly unsuitable as a bar for those reasons, as well as the significant impact on the local residents from the late night operation and dispersal. And I would also highlight that the consultation carried out by the applicant, I don't believe included Bywater Street and Smith Street, where they're proposing to send the customers for their taxis and smoking. Another important aspect of this application, which is definitely not evident to the committee from the application, is that St George is a brand of the Brandy Melville fashion retail chain, and Brandy Melville has a significant size store within a couple of hundred meters of this site, and is a brand that targets pre-teen and teenage girls. And the coffee shop itself sells merchandise from the Brandy Melville range, and you can buy Brandy Melville, as you can buy St George branded merchandise in Brandy Melville. So there's no hiding from the fact that this is a Brandy Melville enterprise, and hence will be particularly attractive to teenage girls who perceive, and I have teenage daughters, so I know this very well, who are attracted to the Brandy Melville brand and want to have their soft drink and snack in the Brandy Melville associated coffee shop. But if you grant this application, you're going to have those teenage girls sitting next to alcohol drinking adults till 9, 10 o'clock at night. And it would give the impression to the public and to the press, no doubt, that RBKC is endorsing and supporting and encouraging teenage girls to be attracted to drinking alcohol and to take their soft drinks in a venue that is serving alcohol and closely associated with the Brandy Melville brand. And my understanding is the equivalent coffee shop, Brandy Melville coffee shop in New York, does not have an alcohol license and does not serve alcohol, no doubt for that very reason. Obviously, one other aspect of the licensing criteria is crime and disorder, and the applicant's representative has alluded to the fact that they are operating sites in Covent Garden, but those sites are 3 miles away from this venue, and so it's hard to see how their designated premises supervisor can supervise those premises and this premises and continue and carry out his role as a senior manager at Brandy Melville as the evidence they provided outlines. And therefore I would, it seems that there will be no on-site supervision of these potentially extensive conditions that might be imposed if the license was granted. And I would therefore suggest that a condition of this license should match that which was granted by City of Westminster in 2022 for the venue in St Martin's Lane, that a licensed person should be present at the venue from 8 o'clock onwards whenever there's alcohol being served. So I think that would be only consistent and appropriate in this for this venue as well. Finally, there is a significant question. There's a significant question regarding the change of use of the premises from what is now a coffee shop to a drinking-led venue.
I'm sorry, you're way past 10 minutes.
Okay, well, I'll finish there, but I think it would be appropriate for the planning department to decide whether this requires a change of use planning application before they begin serving alcohol.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any questions from the committee? Councillor Benton.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me, I've got too many screens. So I'd just like to ask, so I mean, so to get to what I think is the root of the question, that this is going to be a wine bar and not a cafe where you can have a glass of wine and that, right. And just as a it might be a bit of an abstraction, but if you'd humour me, are there conditions that you would actually welcome if it, were it to be granted, were we minded to grant this license, where, well, the two which would make you at least confident that, okay, if something goes wrong, you can always object. And by the way, we're always saying this, if there are disturbances, object, because we can't do anything about that if there are any disturbances and we haven't heard about it. So, always, get that hotline on your phone. Right? But in terms of just ensuring that it's that type of operation, and that there won't be, the other thing I'm picking up is it's not just noise and nuisance, it's also rubbish. I will be picking this up later about the actual, how the applicants would be keeping the area clean and stopping people using your the areas on your property, etc., etc. But are there conditions that you would be potentially, possibly, maybe satisfied with at all that would ensure that it would stay the kind of place? I know on my street there's a place which was a cafe. They ended up opening up to having wine and beer, and they're out. It's very well behaved, no complaints. It's residential. So I know it can be done. So not, I think I may be over asking the question, but please let me know.
So I think the important things are the number of covers, which has been misrepresented to the residents at the initial meeting. And I think a condition that limited the number of covers to, say, 75 that Mr. Saracino represented to us at that residents' meeting would help to obviously alleviate the scale of the problem. I think a condition that limits the hours to 7 p.m. or thereabouts would have a significantly alleviate the concerns, because we're used to, and it's accepted, that we have commercial activity in the King's Road to around that time. So those two conditions, I think many of the conditions that the applicant has proposed are unenforceable. You can't check whether people are drinking their drink at a table or standing up. You can't, and neither the local residents nor the council will be able to enforce it. The applicant can't control what happens to their customer, or what their customers do outside of the venue. So I think limiting the hours, limiting the number of covers are two critical things in this that would mitigate some of the concerns that have been represented by the 25 objections that you've received.
Thank you. And a quick follow-up, if you don't mind, Chair. And also, yes, to bring it, because I suppose I have in my mind an example of a good place which has done that and we haven't had problems with. And understanding every site, every area has its own challenges, and not everywhere is the same. They're also, it's really the same question, but about the issue of having young people going there drinking soft drinks or coffee or whatever, because I'm quite confident that doesn't have to follow. One doesn't have to follow from the other, but acknowledging that there are unique, unique cases. So, what about that? Is that something that you could see being mitigated by conditions?
Basically, no. I mean, this is a Brandy Melville coffee shop. Would become a wine bar if you grant this application. So there's no getting away from that fact, and it's common knowledge and well known, and they're marketing it themselves as a Brandy Melville associated enterprise. And so I can't see what they can do. They can take away the merchandise, but even if they change the name, the clientele of Brandy Melville know that this is Brandy Melville's coffee shop now maybe to become a wine bar. So I find it hard to see a condition that would mitigate that. Just to clarify one other thing, that I believe the council solicitors proposed a condition that this sale of alcohol is only ancillary to operation as a coffee shop, and I think that's a very important condition that we would that the objectors would definitely like to see included.
Thank you.
Councillor Areti.
Thanks, Chairman. A couple of questions, really. Thank you for your speech. The crux of your speech essentially is all about the problems, being proximity to the residential areas, noise, disturbance, late night refuse collections, etc. Essentially, you just answered my colleague's question about, are you admitting the fact that you're happy for a 7 p.m. timing? First question.
I would say there is no residents' association at Wellington Square, but if there was, I think I'd be the chairman of it. So I can't speak for all the residents, but I think that would be something that would be acceptable to the residents of Wellington Square, really in the context of the precedent that there's the shops stay open typically till 6 or 7, and certainly venues that create a lot of disturbance don't stay open beyond that time.
So you mean it's a good compromise from
yes.
the sector, right? Good. Yeah.
Personally, I would rather there was no. Excuse me. Personally, I would rather that no license was granted at all. But if there was a license, I would prefer or would support that it had a trial period, and I don't understand why the applicants refused to consider a trial period.
Thank you. I don't know, in the applicant's speech, they made it clear during our conversations that the wine is essentially an ancillary, but not the primary operations. I'm sure we'll come back to the drafting conditions. We'll give you more confidence on that. My final question would be, if the applicant could submit and prove substantially that they could mitigate problems, some of the problems that you raised, for example, noise, disturbance, overflowing, for example, if they could prove with the substantial plan, would you be happy for the timing that they submitted, which will be 10 p.m.? So essentially they wouldn't create any sort of extra noise or any nuisance that any resident would anticipate. Thank you.
Well, I think the applicant has done what they can do to try and mitigate our concerns with their operational management plan, but the problem with that plan is it's completely unenforceable. They can't force people to meet their taxes in Smith Street, and they can't force their customers, once they're outside the venue, to smoke in Bywater instead of the leafy square opposite. And nor have they consulted with the residents of Smith Street or Bywater Street to see whether those residents are happy to have people discarding their cigarette ends on their doorsteps and have a line of taxis lined up in Smith Street at 11:15 at night. So I don't see any mitigation that they can do to alleviate the local residents' concerns, because if you've got 110 people dispersing from a venue at 10:30 at night, trying to get taxis and onto a narrow pavement, people are going to be injured, and and even if they're not injured, they're going to be slamming taxi doors, shouting, talking, because they're drunk. And the fact that this is a coffee shop in the daytime, who's drinking? No, people aren't drinking coffee after 7, 8 o'clock in the evening. So the only activity will be alcohol drinking into the late evening with very limited food. They talk about substantial food. There's no kitchen on the site, and they're serving a few baguettes. So people will be drinking without having a full meal.
Can I just say that in the past we had 2 pubs on either side of Wellington Square. One was in Royal Avenue, which is now the McDonald's, and the other was the Markham Arms, which has now been taken over, that firm, and we don't know what's going to happen to that. Those were the problems when we had these 2 pubs around. The pubs have gone. Now we are facing up with something rather similar, and that is why we all object to this.
My questions have been answered. I shall now move for any questions from our legal advisor.
I'll wait till the draft conditions session. I haven't got any particular questions at this stage.
And does the applicant have any questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you. At this stage, I'd like to ask our legal advisor to deal with the draft conditions and any other queries that she may have.
Thank you, Chair. Has everybody received the draft conditions that were circulated yesterday? Jolly good. Okay, so I will run through them because obviously we're being live streamed, so obviously people need to hear on the live stream as well. If you've got anything to say, if you want to chip in, the bits in red are my writing, the black writing is the applicant's suggested conditions. So if we start off with the first condition suggested by the applicant, which are 1 to 10, number 1, Ms Lefevre, are you happy with my tweak to number 1? Thank you. Same for number 2, are you happy with my tweak to number 2? Thank you. Number 3, I haven't changed, it just says substantial food and non-alcoholic beverages to be available during permitted hours. Are you happy with the tweak to number 4? Thank you. Number 5, are you happy with the challenge 25 notice in addition to your one? Thank you. Number 6, no smells, there's no change to that. Number 7, I haven't changed that, no rubbish to be deposited outside between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. Number 8, I've added some wording to your refuse collection. Are you happy with that? Thank you. Number 9, I've put in our preferred wording. Are you happy with our alternative wording? Thank you. Number 10, I've just tweaked that slightly. You happy with that? Okay. Now, my additional conditions. Obviously, number 11 is obviously one of the crux of the matters. Obviously, the residents are concerned that this is going to morph into a wine bar. And so I've suggested a condition which basically says that alcohol is to be ancillary to the main function as a coffee shop. Are we happy with that condition?
It's clearly an important control mechanism for the whole of the licence if you were minded to grant it. It's exactly consistent with our intention for the application. And I've used this phrase so often you're probably, I'm sure, sick of hearing it, but it does bake into the grant of any licence that you're minded to make that primary function of the premises as the coffee shop. So yes, and thank you for the drafting.
Thank you very much. Number 12, so a lot of these conditions which I've suggested I've pulled from your operational management plan as well, to be honest. So some of them are mine, some of them kind of your kind of type conditions. So you've spoken about having one SIA on duty from 6 p.m. every night. Are you happy with my suggested wording, obviously with the additional bit about one additional SIA for every 50 customers in excess of 100? Are you happy with that?
We would suggest you strike that wording, one additional SIA door supervisor. It could never bite because we could never get to those numbers. Our numbers are based on our fire safety risk assessment. We couldn't get to those numbers, and so that part of the condition would become
I thought there was
irrelevant.
118 covers, you said.
118, yes, but we'd have to get to 150 for that second part of the condition to apply.
One additional SIA door supervisor shall be provided for every... All right, okay. So how about one additional SIA supervisor for any customers in excess of 100 customers? Take out that bit about 50, excess 50.
I have to say, my submission would be that one SIA door staff for the full capacity of a premises of this type to the hours it's operating with a single ingress point is frankly more than you would normally see on an application of this scale. 2 is really disproportionate and excessive. So we wouldn't agree to that, and it wasn't clearly the intention that sat behind the initial drafting,
Yes, sorry,
which was to bite
yeah.
at a number that we could never get to. Those figures are sensible figures taken in the abstract, that you get to 150 and 2 SIA door staff might be appropriate, but we're talking about smaller numbers and always would be talking about smaller numbers. So my invitation remains the same.
So you're just wanting one SIA
Yes.
staff from 6 p.m. each night, full stop. Can I have the objectors' comments, please?
Yeah, my main comment there is that if they're going to lock one of the doors, then from a fire safety perspective, there should be an SIA on that door to open it if there's a fire. Otherwise, the people inside will be trapped and burnt to death.
I think the condition says that the door can be opened for access and egress. I think that's
Emergency
number
exit.
21,
Correct.
I think. But we
Yeah,
can come to that in a minute.
It's currently blocked off by some packing case, and if it can be opened, then how are the patrons, the customers, going to know how to open it? It's not a fire door at the moment.
And this isn't rocket science either. This is typical for doors to be restricted in this way after particular times to become emergency exit use only. That is not a problem. That's easy to do with signage. It's easy to do with the door furniture, so that it's not a difficulty. We wouldn't offer that as a condition, neither would it have been proposed as a condition in this draft document if it were impossible. It is far from impossible. It's utterly normal, frankly.
Do you have any other comments on the revised suggestion that just one SIA door staff full stop for the 118? 6 p.m. each night.
Yeah, I just come back to my same point. There's very restricted. There's access to the 124C. It's through an alleyway that they've created from 126 to 124C without planning permission. And whether it really meets fire regulations, I guess they've represented it does, but I'm not an expert, so I don't know. But I am concerned if that door is going to be a fire exit, how are patrons going to be able to exit through it in the case of a fire if there's no door supervisor or other member of staff there?
Could I interject here? You have a fire door. Is there that you push it and it goes out? Is that correct? It's not a key or anything. Right. Thank you.
That would be unlawful under the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order. You can't lock exits that are intended to be used in emergency circumstances as a fire exit. I do need to correct the narrative that's beginning to develop about the absence of planning permission. That is not the circumstance that you are dealing with here. And again, if there were an issue with an outstanding issue at all with planning, no doubt planning, who are part of the consultee panel for this as any licensing application, would have said so. They've been good enough to respond and tell you what the position is in their non-representation but informative, which is in our papers.
So just for my benefit, can you just, so you've operated as a coffee shop at 126 since mid-2022?
That's correct.
And then in the recent months, you've amalgamated?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay,
that's
fine.
Exactly right.
So, and they've obviously got two separate doors. There's like an alleyway which has been formed to join the two units. And is it the 124C that's going to be closed at 8 or 126?
Correct, yeah.
And then from what Councillor Evans has just said, can you open it from inside even if
That's
it's
right,
locked
you have
outside?
a bar on it so that it
Okay,
becomes...
so people can exit.
Yeah.
But you're saying no?
My observations last night was it doesn't have a bar for a fire exit. Maybe I didn't know, it wasn't clear to me, but it's not clear to me. It's never been a fire door before. It was an access to a hairdressing salon. To my observations, it hasn't been adapted since then, so we need to be very clear that that is a fire door and can be used as such.
Can we get the applicant to confirm on record?
So there may, I don't know, it's possible that there was a degree of misunderstanding in a previous question. It's equipable with a bar to secure the exit from the premises.
So it's not now,
That's
but you will
Yeah.
add a bar.
That's
And
correct.
I think a condition, right,
No problem at all.
okay. So a bar condition, exit bar condition.
Just to be clear, they just misrepresented that it is a fire exit and has a bar, and now they're changing their mind. I believe it's a criminal offence to misrepresent in a licensing application.
Right, we can certainly add that as a condition because obviously that is very important. Okay. Sorry. Okay, right. So, number 12, were you happy with the second part of the record of SIA staff? Thank you. Right, moving on to number 13. Are you happy with that condition, Mr. Fitch?
How will the SIA cope with people who cross the road and smoke and wait for their taxis? They'll go, if he's moving them off the pavement, they'll just cross the road into Wellington Square.
Well, perhaps the applicant can help out here, but obviously there is a limit to how far an applicant is responsible once customers leave the premises. Obviously, in the immediate vicinity, then there will be an element of control. Once they kind of go beyond that, it's difficult for the SIA staff to control. It boils down to good management and good SIA staff. I don't know if Ms Lefebvre's got any other points to add.
I don't think I can improve on that analysis. It's simply correct.
what is clear from your own comments is that it's impossible for the applicant to control the customers once they're outside the venue. SIA or 2 SIAs, 10 SIAs, it's impossible to enforce these conditions, enforce the smoking in other zones. So it's these conditions.
I think it boils down, well, firstly, it boils down to good management by the premises, and secondly, it boils down to extent. I mean, it's how long is a piece of string, but obviously if something's happening immediately outside the premises, then there will be direct control by the management and by the SIA staff. But clearly once customers depart and go around the corner, then yes, you are right, it's not really enforceable. I agree. But if they've got an operational management plan in place, then you'd like to think that the SIAs could patrol, well, there's only one SIA, the SIA could patrol the area, perhaps once everybody's vacated, that could be built into an operational management plan. But yes, there is a limit, is the answer.
I'm sorry to keep on at this. They're not going round the corner. If they cross the Wellington Square, they will be about from here to where the applicants are sitting. So it is not a far away place, it's just immediately opposite.
Perhaps the applicant can comment on what they envisage the SIA doing.
Well, that's correct, and the one SIA to control the egress, and it's the total egress, sort of 118 customers in total, likely or highly unlikely to be an entire decanting of a premises in one go. Almost always. In all premises, I'm not talking about this premises specifically, but almost every premises has a natural dispersal from a premises in the course of an evening. A single SIA is appropriate and considered by much greater minds and analysts than me to be adequate to guide, steer and control numbers of up to or between 100 and 150. That's where this draft condition started from. As to the extent to which any individual can actually control the conduct of another, well, that again is quite a big philosophical question. What's understood in the licensing field is that a premises has responsibility to properly manage with all the material and controls at its disposal within the vicinity of its premises. So to direct, advise, instruct, point. But the people who are being advised, directed, pointed are themselves responsible for their own behaviour as well. And the piece of management that is critical is making sure that customers don't become drunk whilst on the premises, don't become intoxicated so they're out of control of themselves. That would be a really serious management failure, and it's that the other controls that we've been speaking about in the course of this hearing is designed to avoid completely, not least this important proposed new condition 11, the sale of alcohol, which is a limited offering, as you've heard in the course of the hearing, is at all times to be ancillary to the primary function of this premises, which is as a coffee shop. So that's sort of an expanded answer. As to the enforceability of a condition of this type, if this is not enforceable, then every licensing authority in almost every application it grants is imposing an unenforceable condition. Of course it's enforceable, and the responsible authorities, were they here, would say exactly this. It's a condition that appears on thousands, tens of thousands of licenses in the country, and nobody has a difficulty in the enforcement of a condition that looks exactly like this.
Okay, I think we've taken that. Oh, sorry.
Just one more thing. I think in the context of this, it's even more important to consider a condition which that states that a licensed person should be on the premises from 8 o'clock in the evening, because there clearly can be and will be issues with dispersal, and that can only be suitably managed by a licensed person being up at the premises.
I was going to propose a condition that a person and licence holder should be on the premises when alcohol is being served, but we can discuss that further down. If we just go through the list at the moment, and I've made like a little note of things that have cropped up during the hearing. Right, number 14, this is the staff training. Are you happy with the staff training condition?
No difficulty with that.
Thank you. Number 15, deliveries to the premises not taking place between 10 and 8.
Just one observation. Deliveries are already taking place to the premises. We'd ask for 7 o'clock in the morning, so the restriction to be between 10 o'clock in the evening and 7 o'clock.
10 and 7, so that would tie in with the previous condition, which I think was rubbish. Is that acceptable?
Those, if I may, those deliveries cause congestion on the King's Road every morning. There's no loading allowed outside the premises, but their white van loads and unloads from the premises over an extended period each morning, and so I think it shouldn't be 7 o'clock, it should be 8 o'clock or later when loading is allowed.
So is it double yellow lines outside the premises? I mean, obviously this is kind of road traffic legislation, which is kind of going beyond licensing law.
Yeah, but I think the loading and unloading should be consistent with the restrictions outside. It's double yellow lines, and I think it's 10 o'clock is the loading is allowed after 10, but I'd have to check that.
Okay, so I mean, at the end of the day, regardless of what time we put on, obviously it will be governed by road traffic legislation. So if they do park when they can't, or load and unload where they can't, then obviously they're going to be subject to a fine, I guess, under the road traffic legislation. I'll just go back to the applicant to see what they have to say.
I'm so sorry. I missed the last observation.
I just wondered, Mr. McWilliam is just concerned that the loading restrictions don't start until 10, I think you said. But
and your point is quite right. We'd be governed, as everybody is governed by parking regulations in any event. I can't speak now to the precise restriction, so I don't have that at my fingertips. I would ask for one other gloss which is consistent with your policy and makes a carve out for deliveries for fresh produce, which sometimes has to be delivered outside of and is dependent on the provider of fresh produce. So that's only to bring that proposed condition in line.
what
with
time are
your
you
policy.
thinking then?
Well, really more, we were wondering about a wording that would say something like delivery to the premises should not take place between 2200 and 0700 following days, saving for fresh produce.
So that basically means any time though. I mean, what would be the earliest time you would expect fresh produce to be delivered? And is it just one delivery of fresh produce you get in one hit, or is it several deliveries?
No, I think it's all right. I think we can manage our supplier within those time constraints. So we were aligning ourselves with the wording in the policy, but I think we can, in fact, for this premises, align ourselves with the hours. So
ignore that bit
my
about fresh
observation.
produce.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take that out. Thank you. All right, so you want 7 and you want 8. So the committee can make a decision on that. Thank you. Right, number 16, having a dedicated telephone numbers on display. You fine with that? Thank you. Number 17, as a standard, no music or amplified sound to cause nuisance. Number 18, so I've kind of picked this from your operational management plan. So I'll change patrons to customers. I'll try and make the word customers consistent. Customers permitted to temporarily leave and then re-enter shall be limited to 5 at any one time, shall not be permitted to take glasses or drinks with them, and if they're smoking shall be directed to the corner of Bywater Street by the SIA door supervisor when on duty. Do you have any comments?
I made my comments about Bywater Street before. You didn't allow me to speak to number 16.
Sorry.
This telephone number,
Yeah.
is that going to be in the window of the thing? And secondly, say at 10 o'clock or 10:30 at night, is the duty supervisor able to answer phones of complaint?
It's during permitted hours, so that's when the licence is operational from 10 till 10, or 10 till 9 on Sundays, and it needs to be, well, I presume it will be displayed in the window, so I can add the word. I mean, it's got to be on display to the public, but I can add in the window if you're prepared to have it in the window. Yeah, I mean, that's probably the only place it would be anyway, I would imagine. I'll add in the words in the window to make it clear. Yes, yeah, visible, yeah.
Advisor be able to answer complaints at closing time?
Or they'll be able to, during the operation of the licence, so whatever hours the shop, or whatever the permitted hours for the sale of alcohol are, it will be during those hours.
Okay.
So if the premises closes at, or during the operation of the licence, I suppose technically speaking, if alcohol finishes at 10, then that will be the cut-off, but perhaps we can change that to opening hours. Yeah, during opening hours, so it would be like the 10:30 opening hours. So basically while the premises is open. Is that okay? Thank you.
Not really, because the problems are going to come after closure, after the place is closed, when people are out in the street.
The chair's just reminded me that obviously there's the online logging system that the council has to log complaints, and obviously this discussion is basically if the council are minded to grant the licence, but if there are problems going ahead, there is the review mechanism. And also, if any further applications are made, or even at a review, any complaints which are logged on the council's website, they will be brought before any future committee. So it will build up a history of any problems, if any do occur. I mean, that's basically how it works. But obviously, we can only put so much in conditions. We can't basically require them to be on call beyond the opening hours.
So what is the point of having the telephone on the outside if complaints have to be made to the council?
Well, the point is so that they can be contacted during opening hours, and then obviously after that closes, then you'd have to report it to the council. I think we got to we did 18. Number 19, that's about a litter sweep. Are you happy with the entire wording? Thank you. Number 20, so this is a standard condition we have requiring there to be meetings with residents hosted twice a year to discuss any issues that occur. Is the applicant happy with that condition? Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine.
Number 21, there's two parts. Are there any external windows, or is it all just doors? There's no windows, okay. The external doors of the premises shall be kept closed at all times except for access and egress and in the case of an emergency, so that is to contain noise. And the external door to 124C Kings Road shall not be used by customers from 8 p.m. until the end of permitted hours each day, except in the case of an emergency. And I think we're going to add in the condition about this door needs to have, what do they call it, a lockable fire exit mechanism.
It's push bars, I think, is the form.
Inside, yeah. Push bar. Fire. Before this licence takes effect? Right, number 22. The premises shall operate a dispersal policy and all staff shall be trained in its implementation, a copy to be available for inspection by the police or the council. Are you happy with that?
I'm sorry. Can we go? Yes, we are happy with 22. Can we just go back to 21, please?
Yes.
I was concentrating on the second part of it,
Okay.
and confirming that there were no windows. It's really the door to 126 and why that must be closed at all times, saving for access and egress. I know that Mr. Anderson has carried out his assessments on a different assumption to that door being closed at all times, and I think we would resist that part of the condition in the extent to which it's currently drafted. Mr. Anderson, is that right? Oh, sorry.
So would you, sorry.
Yes, so section 5.2 of our report looks at noise breakout, and I've taken an internal noise level of 80 dBA, which is significantly higher than I think we will actually have, and done calculations of noise breakout through fully opened doors to the nearest premises. And that demonstrates that there is no noise increase externally at any of the nearby residential windows. So having the doors open, and there are only the entrance doors, there's no windows in any event, so it's just those two main entrance doors to give a bit more ventilation on what would be on probably a hot day. There is no noise impact to those doors being left fully open at any time.
Can I ask, obviously this was obviously on the basis that it was operating as a coffee shop at that point when the assessment was taken out. One, is there air conditioning in the place? And two, if you are proposing that the doors be left open for a certain time, is there a time when you'd be happy for them to be closed, particularly in the evening, particularly when people are drinking alcohol and they might naturally be noisier?
So my assessment was done on the basis that it is operating as a coffee shop with bar. So the 80 dBA noise level is taken from Institute of Acoustics guidelines for premises which do have alcohol service. And that internal noise level of 80 dBA is pretty robust for any premises, not just a coffee shop, but a coffee shop that sells alcohol, a restaurant that sells alcohol, with low key background music, and that's the critical part of it. That the music provision is background only. There's no loud amplified music, and when we have that at any time of the day and night, because as you'll see in my measurements, the noise level on Kings Road and on Wellington Square is consistent through the early evening period up until 10:30. So acoustically, there is no implication on a change in noise climate if those doors are to stay open till 10:30, fully opened. In terms of your other questions about air conditioning or about whether there's a compromise, that's not one for me.
There is air conditioning. There would have to be air conditioning. The door to 124C is dealt with, I think, in the second part of the condition, the proposed condition already. So it's the door to 126 that remains in issue and on which Mr. Anderson's comments directly bite. We don't see currently that there's an evidential basis to require that that door remain closed at all times, saving for ingress and egress. In the end, it will be a matter for the committee if they feel the need to restrict that the opening of that door based on all the evidence and the observations that they've heard. But that's why I wanted Mr. Anderson to make that point clear, the basis of his assessment of the premises.
Right, so just that I'm clear in my head, and I'm going to come to the objectors in a second just to check their views. So the first bit of the condition, the external doors of the premises shall be kept closed at all times. You don't want them to be kept closed at all times. But in relation to the second part, the external door to 124C shall not be used by customers, so that implies it's going to be closed, from 8 until the end of permitted hours, except in the case of an emergency. And then you're also going to have that add-on bit for that door about the licence not biting until the inside push bar fire exit is in situ. Okay, I don't know if the objectors have got any comments on that.
Yeah, I think the objectors feel strongly that the door should be kept closed because as it is, as I mentioned in my representations, that these are glass-fronted premises, so the opportunity for there's no insulation from the noise inside, and if we have the door permanently open throughout the evening, then the noise from inside. The assessment was done in Wellington Square, but there are residents above the premises. There are residents on the Kings Road directly opposite the premises who will be significantly impacted if there's the doors left open and the noise is coming out into the street. And also, I'd suggest that this shouldn't be the end of permitted hours because permitted hours is 10 o'clock. It should be until closing time, till 10:30, for the second part.
Is that okay?
Well, we hear the observation and we've made our own observations. Just a point of clarification, Mr Anderson carried out his assessment at a multiplicity of points, not a single point. He can speak to that, but it's in his report, so it's not limited in the way it's just been suggested.
And just to be clear from my point of view, obviously it's coffee shop at the moment, and I know you said you did the assessment on the basis of it being a coffee shop with ancillary wine bar. Take the scenario where people might be more likely to drink wine in the evenings, more so than coffee, and obviously people do generally get a little bit louder. How is that factored into your report?
Just to rewind to where we've assessed to, bullet point 3 of section 5.2 outlines that we've actually assessed to the first floor window at 128A Kings Road, and also which is only 6 metres away. In terms of how we've done our model, we've assumed an internal noise level of 80 dBA. For a normal coffee shop, your internal noise levels would be around 65 or 70 dBA. So we've allowed them to be 10 dB louder when we're doing our assessment of noise breakout. So we've taken a worst case position of a premises with alcohol as opposed to a coffee shop.
80 dBA, 80 dBA versus, yes, 65, which is the base.
65, 70 is pretty standard for a coffee shop with background music.
Okay.
And may I make one... Oh, I'm sorry, I can see the councillor has his light on.
No, I was just checking, what would be the ideal decibels for a bar or a wine bar, for example? What decibels would you anticipate?
So for a restaurant, a busy restaurant, which is where I've taken this from being, that's around 80 dBA. What they call a music bar, so somewhere with live music going on, would be around 100. So a pub, I measured the Cadogan Arms a couple of weeks ago on a really busy night, and they were at 75 dBA. So the 80 I've used is quite robust. So 75 dBA is what I actually measured within the Cadogan Arms, so just down the road. That was for a separate assessment. But actually, so the numbers I've used are louder than that and very robust. So I'm very confident that I've over-egged it, if anything.
And may I make just perhaps a final observation on this condition, reminding ourselves that if you were minded to put the draft condition 11 on, that this would be conditioned as a coffee shop throughout the hours of its operation. And secondly, although our preference would be, based on Mr Anderson's report, to have that entrance to 126 unrestricted, we do want to work with our community. We do hear the concerns and the observations that have been made. If you were minded to restrict those hours so that the doors were effectively consistent, the one with the other, and bring that 126 door to close at 8 o'clock in the evening, saving for ingress and egress, that is certainly something that would be acceptable for us.
Yes, although I'd prefer it was 7 o'clock, which is consistent with other premises in the commercial activity on the King's Road, but some limitations, 7 o'clock or at the latest 8.
Thank you. Right, I think we did 22. Number 23, any customers wanting to order taxis will be encouraged to order within the premises and to request pick-up from Smith Street and to wait inside until the taxi arrives, and there's to be legible notices to this effect. Is that acceptable?
It is.
Thank you. I take on board your earlier point because it still applies.
No, we think this is unworkable. How is a customer who wants a taxi? Is he going to go up to the managers and say, I'm going to order a taxi, and then be told when to come? They will come out of, that'll be too complicated. They will come out and stand in Wellington Square and hail taxis or get on their mobiles and order an Uber car, and they'll come into the square.
Thank you. Right, and then the extra conditions, forgive me if I'm repeating myself, are you happy to have a condition, there shall be a personal licence holder on duty on the premises at all times when the premises are authorised to sell alcohol? Thank you. That's the one you wanted. On duty. We've done litter sweep. We've done the exit bar. You've referenced, I mean, obviously you've said 118 covers. You've referenced 75 covers. I'm aware the Fire Authority haven't made a representation, and they're normally who we take the lead from for capacity limits. You're not willing to reduce to 75 covers,
no,
obviously it's 180.
It's born of our own fire safety risk assessment. That's where the number has come from.
I think, to be clear, the first time that any of the competent authorities or the objectors were aware of the 118 covers was last Friday. So no doubt the fire department haven't been able to assess this on that basis because they weren't made aware of it. And we were specifically told by Mr. Saracino that there would be 75 covers at the venue, and the objections that have been received have been on that basis. So,
Mr. Williams, are you able to confirm that the Fire Authority were notified of this in application in its entirety in the current form?
I would assume that they would have been informed at the time of the application. They'd have got a copy of the application. I'm not aware of any other information going to them regarding capacity.
Thank you.
Just to be clear, the original application makes no reference at all to the number of covers at the venue.
Apart from in the operational management plan, which was recently submitted, I believe.
Yes, only in the additional information, which, as I say, arrived with us on Friday.
Well, absolutely. It's born of the fire risk assessment, and responsible authorities, had they concerns about an application which shows no restrictions at all in terms of numbers, no doubt would have made their observations on the back of that and that alone.
I think the Chair's just asking, if you could correct me if I'm wrong, but you do your own fire risk assessment and that becomes available as part of the papers, and the Fire Authority would have had a chance to see that, is that correct? With the current numbers?
So it's an independent fire risk assessment. It's not necessary for independence, but we have gone externally to a fire consultant to draw up the fire risk assessment. I don't think, and I say this from now decades of representing the London Fire Brigade in all sorts of capacities, that they would expect to be consulted on a fire risk assessment. That wouldn't be the normal process. The obligation under the fire safety order sits on the responsible person, who is the operator of the premises, the owner or the operator of the premises, to draw up and implement an adequate fire safety risk assessment. And I'll get very boring on this subject, but that was a change in law that took place in about 2005. Until then, the fire brigade were responsible for carrying out the assessments directly. It was too onerous a regulatory burden, and it shifted then onto the responsible persons. We are, of course, happy to show the fire safety risk assessment to the London Fire Brigade. Of course we are, but it has been carried out by a competent, qualified fire risk assessor.
Perhaps I can put that as an informative that you're willing to show it, just to kind of, so it's recorded.
Much better way of putting what I've just said in hundreds of words.
Thank you.
You said you did your own fire risk assessment.
We instruct our own fire risk assessment, so we instruct it to an external fire safety consultant.
Can you show us, please, that it was based on 118 people? Because there's a very, very important fact.
It can be shown to you. It can't be shown to you right now because I haven't got a copy of it right now, but it exists. Yeah.
Can you confirm that the number of 118 people was in the report? We need to know that this was confirmed. It's a very integral part.
I can confirm that we did a fire risk assessment and they allowed us a total of 186 seats, which is 32 in 126 and 86 in 124C.
And you have that in writing?
Yeah.
I'll make sure that's documented, thank you. Okay, so we've already touched on the temporary condition, which you're not amenable to, unless you've changed your mind since the hearing. We've touched on what time alcohol starts. You've said it's in line with our policy, but I just wondered whether, at this point in time, whether you're willing to reduce the hours at all, or is the application as it stands?
The application is as it stands, yes.
Right, I can't think of any other conditions which have cropped up other than the ones we've just covered. Is there any other conditions that the objectors or the councillors want to discuss before we close the hearing?
I think the question of the change of use should be determined by the planning department because this is going to become a drinking-led establishment, at least in the evenings, and that requires a change of use permission, which if it does, it should be determined by the Director of Planning, and that should be a condition that determination is made before the licensing activity starts.
We can't condition that because that's a separate licensing, a separate regime, and it's clear from the Secretary of State's guidance that it's not something that we can have control over, unfortunately. But obviously, if they weren't complying with planning law, then they'd be subject to planning enforcement by the planning department. But it's not something we can cross-reference into here, I'm afraid.
Do our licensing officers have anything to add?
No, nothing from me, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. And our governance officers, anything to add?
Nothing from us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, everyone. We've reached the end of this meeting. The committee now has all the information needed, and we will retire to make our decision in private session. We will not announce the decision today. Instead, the hearing will be closed. A summary determination will be sent to the parties within 5 working days of today's meeting, and a full decision will follow as soon as possible thereafter. The time limit for appealing the decision will not commence until the full decision has been sent to the parties. Thank you for attending, and the hearing is now closed.